Please listen carefully.
Welcome to another episode of the Extra Buttery podcast. My name is Jason Chen, and I'll be joined by my co-host Robert Snow. We've got a bit of a different episode this time. We start the episode with a little chat on Blade Runner 2049, which is coming soon to theaters, and both Rob and I are very excited. And then we get into my VIFF experience so far. I've seen 5 films, and I have to say it's been an interesting time. Hasn't been a standout film, but we'll get into that later. So without any further ado, let's get going. How's it going, Rob?
Oh, it's going all right. It's a rainy day here in Toronto, but sounds like we've got some exciting stuff in our near future when it comes to Blade Runner. Blade Runner is tracking incredibly well. I guess the embargo lifted a day or two ago.
Yes, and Mark Kermode on BBC apparently really likes it a lot, and I tend to agree with him most of the time anyway.
Okay, yeah, so do I. Yeah, I really like his stuff.
I'm really excited. I don't think it'll have the same sort of impact the first one did in terms of technical and visuals, but I expect a very good film.
Now, some people are trying to be extra edgy, and they're saying the original Blade Runner is kind of inherently flawed because of the production behind it and how so many studio execs were trying to stomp all over Scott's vision. So the fact that Villeneuve was able to come in and make the movie he wanted from square one suggests that this is actually better than the original Blade Runner by that very fact.
I guess it depends on if we're comparing the theatrical version or the final cut. Because the theatrical version had a lot of studio interference.
Yeah, exactly. And of course the infamous bit where they kind of cut to a sequence lifted from B-roll from The Shining to kind of...
I don't remember that. What was that?
Well, apparently in the theatrical version, the one that originally hit in 1982, the scene of Harrison Ford driving through the wilderness with Rachel.
Oh, right. Okay.
And they shot the interiors of the car fresh at the studio's behest, and then all of the B-roll of the car moving through the woods was basically just reused footage from the opening of The Shining.
That's so stupid.
That they had in their archives. And if you go back now and you watch clips from the two of them, you're like, oh my god, yeah, they just reused The Shining to kind of paper over what they thought was a terrible film.
Oh my god. So in the final cut, the part where they drive through the woods isn't even
no, because they just end with Deckard and Rachel leaving the apartment building.
Right.
So yeah, I've got to, once I see the film, I've got to then go back and kind of investigate how valid these claims are that 2049 is better than the original, what they're actually saying.
It's kind of hard to compare though, don't you think?
Well, yeah, because, these are films that are made in completely different contexts. You have
yes.
in so many different ways, different directors, different studio approaches, different special effects. In the end, I'm not that, I don't think I'm going to get too hung up on which one's better than the other one. It's where does Blade Runner 2049 sit compared to everything else that's come out this year? And I think, if the advance buzz is to be believed, it's going to be pretty high up there.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of agree with you there. But I'm trying to remember what other movies that I thought were really good, Oscar-worthy type stuff early in the year, and I can't really remember anything specific. You'll need to remind me, Rob. Oh yeah, so you went to see the KINGSMAN, eh?
I did, yeah. So
and
I was kind of disappointed, I have to say. I saw some of the advance, I think it was tracking at about in the mid-30s on Rotten Tomatoes before I went, and I was like, oh well, okay, seems like the fate of All Too Many a sequel. There was maybe one or two really standout good scenes, one of them involving Elton John wearing a parrot costume, and
what?
Yeah, because he pops up in a celebrity cameo, and I had known that he was in it beforehand. I just didn't know how extensive his role was, and the idea is that he's been kidnapped by the villain, played by Julianne Moore, and he's being held against his will in her compound and forced to perform for her. And when he first pops up, the first first 2 or 3 scenes in the movie, it felt kind of pandering, and the stuff they'd written for him was pretty lame. But then
Right.
in the climax, he shows up again and he has a lot more material, and he's performing in this giant parrot costume, this like rainbow thing that looks like a sports mascot, and he's wearing these giant like 4-inch heels, and I think, how does it go down? Harry, played by Colin Firth, and Eggsy, played by Taron Egerton, storm the compound, and Elton John takes this opportunity to take on the two thugs who are guarding where he's being kept, and he like high kicks them in this slow-mo scene and kind of mugs at the camera at the same time. So I laughed out loud at that. That was probably my favorite point. Other than that, yeah, it felt like Matthew Vaughn, the director, a lot of his signature voice had been scrubbed out of this one, like whether it was through too many test screenings and the studio kind of forcing re-edits, or it's hard to say what happened, but there were kind of glimpses of the stuff that you might like from the original one, just not assembled in a way that made it worthwhile.
It's interesting that there was so much studio interference when the first one did so well, when it was purely Vaughn and was it who's that screenwriter he works with all the time? Jane Goldman?
Yeah, Jane Goldman's credited on it, yeah.
Right, yeah. So they often work together, and it's like in Kick-Ass, when they kind of have their own free reign to do whatever they want creatively, they end up doing pretty good stuff. So it's interesting that despite the success of the first film, the studios were so meddling with the second.
Yeah, at least that was the sensation I got. I mean, there was kind of telltale signs of it where, you know, the marketing for the film put a lot of emphasis on the fact that the Kingsman agents have to go to the United States and get help from their sister agency, the Statesman.
Yep.
And they've got a few recognizable faces there: Channing Tatum, Jeff Bridges, Pedro Pascal. And what I was disappointed by was it felt like Tatum and Bridges' material had just been sliced out of the thing. Like, it felt like they had shot a lot more, but then it was just kind of cast aside in favor of the more plot specific stuff that Pascal was doing.
Okay. And
obviously it's nice to see a guy like Pedro Pascal get a lot of material in a big studio film like this, but it just, you could sort of see the seams where Tatum and Bridges had a lot more to do, and suddenly they just didn't anymore.
Yeah, anytime you don't use Bridges to his full potential, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so going back to this year's films, like, we're going to get into the heavy Oscar season in the fall anyway, but, you know, I'm looking at it, and, like, the only one that's really stood out to me is maybe Logan, Dunkirk, maybe Logan Lucky, maybe Wind River, maybe Baby Driver. So there hasn't been, like, a true standout yet, but I think that's going to change once we get all these, like, political biopics come out.
Yeah, there was a Ghost Story from...
Right, with Rooney Mara and Casey
with Rooney
Affleck.
Mara and Casey Affleck, and directed by David Lowery from Ain't Them Bodies Saints.
Yeah, I missed that one. I really wanted to see that.
Yeah, I hadn't seen Ain't Them Bodies Saints, and he was then brought on to do the Pete's Dragon thing for Disney, and did very well. Like, that movie made a lot of money.
Did you see Pete's Dragon? It's actually not bad.
No, I didn't, but I heard that it was a pretty big success for the like month that it came out, and it found its audience essentially. And apparently while he was in post-production on that, I believe he just had this idea for a very surreal existential film that would be done with like a bare bones crew and cast, and it just follows a guy who dies and then ends up haunting his fiancée. As a white sheeted, like, Halloween style ghost.
Yeah, I just remember them talking about the scene where Rooney Mara sits like on the floor and eats pie for like a good 5 minutes.
Yes, yeah, and she's not a dessert person, so it was kind of hard for her to do. So yeah, I saw it at the TIFF Lightbox here. I think it was back in July or something like that. And
TIFF is in the summer? So far. It feels like not so long ago.
No, like the TIFF Lightbox is their like headquarters in downtown Toronto, so they do film screenings all year round.
Oh, I see. I see what you mean. Yeah.
So they tend to bring in more art house stuff, foreign films, things that you wouldn't normally see at a multiplex.
Right.
So they brought in a ghost story, and there was actually a little stinger off the top of the screening that David Lowery recorded just for Lightbox viewers, and he kind of just introed the film. But no, and when I saw it, I was pretty blown away by it. It was it's definitely not something that the average moviegoer would really get. Like, you have to be in the right mindset.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah,
you know, it there's certain things in there that if you're not in a very contemplative or reflective kind of mood, you're just going to find it kind of silly.
And I think it's partly because we expect films to move at a pretty fast clip these days. I think there's a sense that we just need to get things moving. Like, something needs to be happening on the screen at all times. So you don't have the patience to sit through things anymore or let things develop.
And that's definitely a factor here, where like you've got long scenes that are kind of drawn out, and repeated actions or decisions in editing that will that might feel, I don't know, well, I guess the right word is boring for somebody who's not like a really big film geek. So yeah, like, I think it might get a bit of attention at the Oscars, but it's also such a small film with without the kind of typical qualities like a historical epic or a biopic of some kind, like we were saying, that would really catch the attention of the Academy, despite all their efforts to kind of diversify their ranks a little bit. You know, they've been adding newer, younger people hand over fist, but I think it's going to be a while before we see a big change in their voting behavior.
Do you think subject material matters more than technical expertise when it comes to like Oscars and other awards?
It seems to. I mean, like, you know how stuff that lands in those particular categories or genres has a way of kind of capturing people's attention despite, you know, how innovative it might be from one year to another.
Right.
You look at something like Moonlight, for example. Like, Moonlight is a beautiful story, but is the cinematographer doing anything like radically different with the way he shoots that than, say, Emmanuel Lubezki did for any of the films he worked on with Inarritu over the years? Maybe not. You know, in terms of like technical brilliance, maybe not. It's still beautiful and, you know, aesthetically pleasing, but I think it was that kind of that core story thing that drew people into that.
Yeah, fair enough. I think Moonlight had a really nice texture to it. There are a lot of colors and even fabrics and close-up shots where you could really almost reach out and touch the characters physically.
Oh yeah, like don't get me wrong, like we devoted so much airtime to
that's true
to how beautiful Moonlight was, like closer to when it came out, but
that's true.
Yeah, I still think the Academy can be a bit of a sucker for a particular kind of story over a particular style of execution.
Yeah, totally. And which is kind of like a nice segue, because VIFF is going on right now.
Yep.
It's going to go on for the next 2 weeks, I think, until October 13th.
Were you able to get any of the tickets that you were hoping to?
Yeah, so I planned it out and I got all the tickets all at once. And then, you know, things happen, and it turns out that when you buy tickets at VIFF, you can't refund them. You can only exchange them. So I have tickets to movies that I won't be able to make, but I've been to 5 movies so far.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think I ended up spending over like $200.
Yeah.
But I mean, I asked that question about subject material because for, I'd say, 3 of the films I saw, the subject material wasn't particularly interesting, but they were obviously all very well shot and well acted.
Yeah.
So I can see none of them winning awards, partly because I feel like maybe the subject material isn't really interesting enough, or it just doesn't have a wide enough release. Anyway, would you like to hear what I saw?
Yeah, like, well, maybe we'll kind of mirror what we did with our TIFF coverage. Like, what were the standout ones that you've seen so far?
You know what? That's the problem. None.
Oh, really? Like, you've just seen like a string of stinkers?
They're not stinkers, except for one, and we'll get to that because I feel like I have a lot to say about it, even though I don't really want to talk about it. So, like, since I've only seen 5 films, I'll just go through
Yeah,
of them
yeah.
anyway.
Go for it.
So the first one I saw was Disappearance, which is a Dutch/Norwegian film.
Okay.
And it's about this woman who's suffering from terminal illness who goes back to northern Norway where it's super cold and super snowy, and she's estranged from her mother, and yet she has a younger half brother, and it's a very atmospheric and moody piece. I swear there's less than 100 lines of dialogue in it, and it's very well shot and it's quite beautiful, but at the same time it feels really empty because not a whole lot happens.
Oh.
And so you kind of, by the end of the movie, you're kind of wondering, going like, really? That was it? I mean, that's all you have to say about this film? And you get the feeling that the director, whose name escapes me right now, his last name's Koole, Koole.
Okay, no, I don't think I've seen anything by him.
And he's like kind of very nuanced, very imagery heavy kind of director who uses imagery to convey an emotion, kind of like that. One of those directors. And so like it's beautiful, but like at the end you're like, man, nothing happens. Where is the rest of the film? And he's trying to make a point with all these like shots of winter and water and all these sounds he comes up with. The sound mixing is great, by the way.
Okay.
At the end it needs to have a little more substance. The emotional weight of the movie doesn't quite match the imagery because the imagery is so strong.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in any other year, I feel like this would be one of the most beautiful films I've seen. Not quite Moonlight level, but there's enough there to keep you interested. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's like a 3 out of 4, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
3 out of 5.
Yeah.
Kind of, pretty good, but not great.
Well, that sort of reminds me of one that I saw at the Toronto Film Festival where it was like really beautifully done. There was a lot of interesting ideas. It was called The Third Murder by a Japanese filmmaker whose name I won't butcher, but
Japanese films are really into the imagery.
Yeah. Well,
they're really slow too.
Apparently, it was a bit of a departure for him because he normally does a little bit of a more upbeat kind of films. I think he's more of a comedy guy, but he went and did this like procedural murder mystery type thing with a sort of kind of a Hitchcockian. Let's reveal who really killed the person off the top and then kind of explore where it goes from there. Yeah, it does sort of remind me of this Norwegian film that you're talking about, where lots of like snowy, very stark images that are all very pretty, but the weight of the dialogue doesn't really hit you in a special way.
Yeah, Disappearance, like, it's not the dialogue isn't heavy or emotional, it's just there's not enough of it.
Right.
So, and it was shortlisted as the Dutch entry for the best foreign language film at the Oscars. Yeah, so it was off to a good start. And then the next film I saw was Sweet Virginia.
Okay.
Have you heard about this one?
No. Okay,
so this is a movie by Jamie Dagg, who is, I believe, one of like the more up and coming young directors. So John Bernthal's in it, Rosemary DeWitt's in it, Christopher Abbott's in it. So it's about this. It's basically a crime drama / thriller, and it's set in this Alaska town. And John Bernthal manages this motel, and Christopher Abbott plays this like really kind of quirky but very violent character called Elwood.
Okay.
And basically the plot is about Elwood murdering or being hired to murder someone, and the whole murder plot goes wrong, and it sets off this chain of events. Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
A lot of people have mentioned that it looks and feels like a Coen Brothers movie, which is very true. It's very darkly lit, well shot. The two main characters, John Bernthal and Christopher Abbott, are violent characters, which you see a lot in the Coen Brothers films. And there's a lot of tension throughout. Like, it doesn't relax a whole lot. I don't think there's actually any humor in it at all. I don't think there's like any breaks in it. It starts off with a shooting, and it just kind of maintains that tension under the surface throughout the film. My problem with it is that I didn't particularly like John Bernthal's character. I think he was a little miscast. what was great about it was that the director was in the audience and he did a little Q&A afterwards.
Oh, yeah. I love it when that happens.
Yeah. And so originally the idea was that John Bernthal's character, Sam, would be a 70-year-old man.
Oh.
And in that sense, the plot would have made more sense because there's a scene where he gets beat up. But if you know John Bernthal, he's like this really built guy.
Yeah, and like when he plays the Punisher in the Marvel TV shows for Netflix, like he just takes an absurd amount of punishment and doesn't stop.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
Yeah. So that could hurt your believability there, I think.
Right. And so the director said, like at the time, John Bernthal was just jacked because literally the day after, he went to film The Punisher.
Right.
And so I guess Bernthal was kind of in that Hulk mode already. And it was supposed to be set in Virginia, which is where the title comes from, but they decided to set it in like this really rural Alaska town, which is again like a Coen Brothers thing where like violence kind of all of a sudden happens in this sleepy town and it sets off a chain of events that affects everyone's lives. Yeah, so it's one of those films. It's quite good. I'd recommend you go see it because I think it's very well done. I don't think it's perfect because I think there are quite a few climactic moments that just don't really feel climactic, like especially the final fight / shootout between John Bernthal and Christopher Abbott. Christopher Abbott, by the way. I've never seen Girls, but apparently he's good in it. And he plays this like mumbly, quirky, super violent character that just kind of one of those like Anton Chigurh, like people have kind of compared him to that, where he just kind of pops up, shoots a couple people, kills a couple people, and then just kind of fucks off.
Oh, okay.
I think I would recommend it. Yeah, it's not bad.
Okay, and it's called Sweet Virginia?
Yeah, Sweet Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah. It was shot locally in BC, so which is kind of nice because I feel like I recognized a couple spots in the movie, but it was filmed in some rural town in the interior, and it's supposed to be Alaska. But anyway, yeah, so that was pretty good. The next movie I saw was The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Oh, Yorgos Lanthimos. We've been talking about that one.
Yes. So this movie, I went to the theater half an hour before because I knew it was going to be popular.
Yep.
And the line was huge.
Oh, like
I
TIFF
think
numbers.
I think people like lined up like an hour before the film started.
Oh yeah, that's super common here.
Yeah, and so at least it wasn't very cold, so it was okay. But you know what? I think The Lobster was way better.
Oh, okay.
Do you know the plot?
All I know is that it's sort of about a mysterious teenager played by the kid who was
he was in Dunkirk.
And he kind of
Barry Keoghan, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think I've seen him in anything else, but he kind of comes into the life of this surgeon played by Colin Farrell. And
so
life kind of falls apart after that.
Yeah. So Barry has this quality that's not unlike Paul Dano.
Oh yeah.
Where like his presence makes you feel uncomfortable because he's got this look, this feel, this gait, and the lines he says in the film are really throw you for a loop. It's not quite as funny as The Lobster. There are certain lines in the dialogue that kind of make you chuckle, but The Killing of a Sacred Deer is definitely more of a horror thriller, psychological.
Okay, so that sort of lines up with what Yorgos Lanthimos and Colin Farrell were saying before they entered production.
Yeah, and so as with any Lanthimos film, like all these characters are very flawed, very weird. Colin Farrell, I think, does a very good job. He plays a surgeon who kind of has a dark past. And Barry Keoghan plays a teenager whose dad died while Colin Farrell was the acting surgeon. So Barry's dad died on the table. And so Barry kind of pops up again in Colin Farrell's life.
Okay.
And Nicole Kidman plays Colin Farrell's wife. And he's got these two teenage kids, or one's a girl and one's a young boy. And there are a couple scenes in there that really kind of shocked people. I heard audible gasps in the audience. There's one part where and I don't want to spoil it too much, where it reminds me of Prisoners. You know that movie with Hugh Jackman?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
and Paul Dano?
the Denis Villeneuve film.
Yes, with, I think it was Jake Gyllenhaal too, right?
Yeah, he plays the detective.
Right. Okay, so there's a part where Paul Dano kind of gets beat up by Hugh Jackman.
Yep.
And there's a similar scene in Killing of a Sacred Deer. And it's just as disturbing, if not more disturbing. It's quite bloody and gory. The reason I don't like it, though, is that there's some sort of like allegorical, metaphorical statement that Lanthimos is trying to make, but I don't think he really makes his point. I don't think it comes across very clear. So you end up having all these like weird characters going through this like weird sequence of events, and you're not quite sure what he exactly means by this. So The Lobster was, I think, relatively more straightforward.
Yeah, like there's definitely moments in The Lobster where Lanthimos kind of throws a curveball at you, like the sudden shift to Colin Farrell's character and Rachel Weisz's character living with these weird solitary people in the woods, all dressed in like rain slickers.
Right.
And the film kind of goes so far with them that you're like, oh wow, this is what the movie is going to be all about now. So yeah, I think The Lobster had a few curveballs, but so you're thinking that like Killing of the Sacred Deer has these curveballs, but they feel kind of unearned in a way.
A little bit. The curveballs that come in Killing of a Sacred Deer, I feel kind of are more telegraphed. It's just the characters and the plot and the motivations of each character. Sometimes I find a little hard to understand. And that was kind of, I think, the general feeling of the audience was that it was very well shot, very well acted, definitely shocking in some parts. But at the end of the day, not particularly interesting in terms of plot or character development. Like, it's almost as if he puts in some scenes just to shock you, just to make you feel uncomfortable.
Just to kind of say like, hey, like you thought The Lobster was dark and creepy. Take a look at this.
Yeah. And Barry Keoghan, like, he really knocks it out of the park. He is super creepy. Anyway, I still recommend it because I feel like it's something you would want to watch.
Yeah, like I'll definitely go to see it. Like even if
was it not playing at TIFF?
It was playing at TIFF, but my schedule was just packed with other stuff, and I knew
I
knew that some of the things that I was choosing over Killing of a Sacred Deer, like I think the day that I could see it, there were like two other films playing that I knew wouldn't open again like anywhere in Canada for probably half a year. So I was like, oh yeah, if I know that Killing of a Sacred Deer is going to open before the end of this year, I'll wait, you know. Yeah.
Wasn't The Lobster nominated for an Oscar, like screenplay or something like that?
Yeah, it was up for screenplay. You know, that's kind of the award category where great films go to die.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if Killing of a Sacred Deer got nominated, but I don't think it will. It's an original screenplay again by Lanthimos and his writing partner, whose name escapes me right now. And then there's a documentary I just had to fit in there. It's called AlphaGo, which is about this Korean Go player called Lee Sedol, who plays against the Google DeepMind AI.
Didn't it come out there a few months ago that DeepMind had finally beaten this guy who had previously been like a champion at Go?
Yeah, so Lee was like the best Go player in the world, and AlphaGo kicks his butt.
Right.
And the story was that Lee Sedol, they played 5 games. The story is that Lee Sedol won the 4th game, but throughout the process realized how quickly AI can learn and all sorts of crazy things about creativity and knowledge and computer learning, and it's got a bunch of funny characters in it, and It was very well put together. Like, it was very coherent. There was a lot of humor in it just because the characters were so funny. So if you get a chance, I recommend it.
Did you find out like if a particular distributor picked up the documentaries? Because I know that's been something that's coming out of festivals a little bit quicker now. Is like Netflix and Amazon and even Hulu to an extent have been wading in and snapping up documentaries, especially maybe because the distribution rights are cheaper than a narrative film.
It could be. I'm not sure who's picked it up, but I imagine it will get picked up and get a much bigger release. I don't see a big distributor for AlphaGo, which is unfortunate. Actually, I'm looking at the IMDb page right now. And it's a 9.6 out of 10 based on 52 votes, though. But I mean, I think that kind of tells you the quality of the documentary.
Sure.
It's really well done.
Yeah. But that leads us to your what sounds like your most maligned film from VIFF so far.
It is bad.
And like you texted me about this this morning before we started recording, and
that was right after I finished the movie.
Oh yeah, okay. So the time
that was like
okay,
midnight
yeah,
my
time difference there. But I had never heard of it. I thought maybe you were catching up with some like French film from a few years back, but it turns out that this is like a new one that came out this year.
Yeah, so it premiered at Cannes. I think it was the opening film.
Oh, okay.
And we didn't hear much about it because there's practically no buzz about it, and for good reason. Like Mother, it is very divisive among critics and audiences.
Okay.
There are people who like it, and there are people like me who absolutely thought it was complete trash. So the movie, anyway, is called ISHMAEL'S GHOSTS, and it's directed by this French quote-unquote auteur. His name is, give me a sec, is Arnaud Desplechin.
Okay.
And Matthew Amalric is in it. Marion Cotillard is in it. In fact, that was the reason I went to go see it, because I figured, any film Marion Cotillard can't be that bad.
Sure.
And Charlotte Gainsbourg is in it. And it's about this film director, who's played by Matthew Amalric. And it's a film within a film that has no beginning, middle, or end, and it's just a mishmash of random scenes spliced in with each other, with character arcs that just don't go anywhere, and characters that do illogical things or have like really uneven characterizations. And so the story is Matthew Amalric is a director who's going through like a midlife crisis. Marion Cotillard plays his wife, who's been missing for 20 years and was declared dead, who suddenly comes back into his life. Charlotte Gainsbourg plays Matthew's girlfriend, who's also an astrophysicist. And when they go on vacation to their cottage or whatever, Marion Cotillard all of a sudden shows up. And then Matthew Amalric, as the film progresses, becomes like, drinks himself into a stupor, freaks out because he has constant nightmares, leaves the film half finished, and his line producer comes to convince him to finish it and like drag him out of the house. And Amalric kind of like has this sudden burst of creativity, and he's explaining the rest of the movie to his line producer, and he's carrying a gun in his hand for no other reason than to shoot his line producer accidentally in the arm.
Is that played for a joke, or is it like a tragic thing?
It's supposed to play off as a joke, but I honestly felt nothing. About an hour into the film, a couple next to me just got up and left, because an hour in, nothing had just happened. It was really painful to sit through, not because I wanted to just like end, to like reach a conclusion. I just wanted it to stop. Like, I just wasn't interested in the rest of the film at all. And the ending was like not even anything close to satisfying. And the film within a film, which is about a spy in France who travels Europe and meets this girl, blah, blah, blah. It makes no sense. There's a scene where like he tracks down this supposed Russian agent, and this Russian agent holds up a cell phone, and the cell phone blows up and like blows half his face off. And it was supposed to be shocking and surprising, but I sat in the chair and I felt nothing because I was so frustrated and wanting the film to end so badly that nothing would have moved me.
You know what? Just your description reminds me of Fellini's 8.5, but like a terrible melodramatic ripoff of 8.5. Because in like 8.5 is one of those, it's held up as one of like the best art house films ever made, the best Italian films ever made, and it's Marcello Mastroianni plays a film director who's caught with writer's block, and around him are orbiting all of these like sycophantic film industry types, and he's dealing with a needy wife and a needy girlfriend, and no matter where he turns, he can't seem to find any spark of inspiration to get his project back on the rails. And it ends up that like it kind of speeds into this conclusion that's kind of surrealistic, and it's often one of those things that pops up in syllabi for film theory courses, for like intro to film. Like if you're studying Italian film or the works of Fellini, you tend to end up watching 8.5 at some point. And I quite like it, but it's just based on the plot outline that you gave. It's almost exactly that, but just with kind of like little distortions. They're like, oh, it's like an 8.5, but different.
Right. And like, I understand where like French films, they kind of like have all sorts of sprawling stories that are emotional and sensual, and they're kind of spliced in, and you kind of have to make sense of all of it and hope that it all comes together.
Did you get like a vibe of like a Godard kind of like random insertion shots kind of thing?
Oh my God, the entire movie was random. Like I said, there was no middle, beginning, and end. Like you could have started the movie an hour in and watched it to the end and still not understand what was going on.
But like, was there like a French New Wave kind of vibe to it, where they were just doing stuff for the hell of it? And
I don't think it was New Wave. Like, this director is known for doing this kind of stuff, and it's a very risky proposition, because if it doesn't come together, then you have a half-baked film that is just full of like scattershot ideas, right?
Right.
And
right.
like, as good as the performances was, it's not like it's poorly shot or poorly acted. It's just there's very little substance to it, I think.
Okay.
Plot doesn't make sense. A lot of people, and some of the critics I read actually after I walked out of theater, like in record time, by the way, like once the credits started rolling, I just got up and I stormed out the theater. Because I was just like, I can't believe I wasted 2 hours on this thing. But anyway, a lot of people have compared it to The Room.
Oh.
Our favorite Tommy Wiseau.
Yes.
The fact that it's so incoherent and so bad that they think it can be a cult classic, which I disagree with, because in my mind, I think Tommy Wiseau made a genuine effort to make a film that he thought was good.
Yes.
And we're kind of laughing at him and with him.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a very tricky distinction, because there's been plenty of filmmakers post The Room who have kind of tried for that, and I think well, firstly, their mistake is that they're trying to make something like The Room, which can't really be,
it can't be replicated.
You can't make a film where the intention is to make it bad so that you enjoy it for being bad. Like, it's got to be an accident, I think. And
so the cult, or The Room, is so bad it's good. Like, that's how people describe it. ISHMAEL'S GHOSTS is just bad. It's just bad.
Yeah.
Like, the acting's good. The production value is obviously there. I think a few times Amara kind of goes overboard, but I heard this is like him reprising a character that he played 10, 20 years ago with the same director.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so there's that continuity there. But after watching this, I don't really care about Dave Plachen's any like other films at all.
Was the film that they made together previously like the first
it's
film?
Very much the same.
But was it well received when it came out?
It was better received, yes.
Okay.
Not like widely praised, but it was fairly well received.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the music doesn't make any sense. There's constantly clashing sort of soundtracks and music in there. You feel like it doesn't fit anywhere. I can't believe a film that has this kind of technical expertise and acting quality can turn out so poorly. I almost want you to see it, Rob, just to see what you say about it.
Well, I mean, I can definitely seek it out, but that's one of the things about the whole festival experience, is that sometimes the movies that screen at a festival, whether it's TIFF or VIFF or the New York Film Festival, like sometimes the titles can be really hard to get afterwards. But yeah, if you're saying that there's like a weird kind of reverse logic in seeing this just to get a taste of it, then maybe I'll track it down.
And it's very self-indulgent, I find. I think that's what I kind of probably hated the most, is that there's this pretentiousness that this director, played by Amarek, is like some sort of tortured artistic genius that I feel that that Desplechin sees as himself, when
yeah.
really, like, the character he plays is a fucking asshole.
Yeah, and that's kind of like that's the essential question that like Fellini's 8.5 rides on is, again, in that case, Marcello Mastroianni is playing a film director whose crisis was partially inspired by Fellini's own life. But I think you have to kind of ask yourself when you're watching that one, what he does over the course of the film, is that like a deal breaker? Like, will you still be interested in following the film through, despite some of the scummier things that he does? And I think the answer ultimately is yes, because you end up relating to him. You feel like he's being besieged by all of these kind of hangers-on who are distracting him from, being in the headspace he needs to be to finish the project. So you're invested in seeing him succeed. And that's probably the essential question with this one, where you're like, you're asking yourself, do I care if Mathieu Amalric's character actually succeeds? If the answer is no, then you're kind of sunk.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I cared nothing about these characters. Absolutely nothing. The film within the film is supposed to be like this really taut, I think, kind of a spy film.
Okay.
And they go to like all these exotic locations like Tajikistan or Tel Aviv or whatever. And it's still like neither of the films work.
And like maybe the fact that they put so much attention on the film within a film, it kind of hurts the framing film, like the actual one that you're watching. It hurts its ability to kind of develop in the way that it should.
Yeah, I really don't know what he's trying to get at. I got up and I overheard someone say, you know what, this film is just like, it's beyond me. I don't get it. And I think whenever people say that, you have a giant problem.
Yeah, because you should be like, even the kind of mediocre films should at least be understandable in some way.
Right, exactly. Okay, this is from Peter de Bruges from Variety, and he didn't like it. And he wrote, if ISHMAEL'S Ghosts were a meal, it would be a massive slab of off-tasting meat alternative, wrapped in fake bacon, cooked in margarine, then covered in dairy-free imitation cheese.
Ooh.
And I think that's a pretty good way to put it, because it is just a mishmash of stupid ideas. And just because a film opens up con doesn't make it good.
No. I mean, we've seen at all kinds of festivals over the years, sometimes the people who run the festival will pick a film that's more notable as being like a possible commercial success or like a mainstream thing, in an effort to kind of build buzz around the festival itself, but it doesn't always pan out for them.
Right.
Like last year at TIFF was a great example. They chose Antoine Fuqua's remake of The Magnificent Seven, which, isn't really a festival film. Like it was a film that was going to get a big rollout in multiplexes, whether it popped up at TIFF or not, and it didn't really set the right tone for the opening of the festival. I think a lot of people were kind of like, huh? But
right.
So I can understand why Cannes they would choose a film with like some pretty recognizable faces, but it probably made a bad gamble in this case.
Yeah, it was a trap and I fell for it. And there's this one part that I just kind of remember just now where Matthew Amalric is trying to explain his film, and he mentions Jackson Pollock and how he's like, look at this creative genius. He just throws paint on a canvas and it conveys emotion and feeling and is brilliant. And I'm like, are you talking about yourself, Desplechin? Because all I see is just fucking crap all over the screen. Like, if you're trying to compare yourself to Jackson Pollock, who I don't think his paintings are as random as people say it is, I think you've got a huge problem with your ego. Well, just what a waste of Charlotte Gainsbourg and Marion Cotillard. But so like I so far VIFF hasn't been particularly impressive, but I've still got like 10 more films to go.
So of those 10, how many are you actually gonna to make it out to?
A good number of it, most of them.
Okay.
I'm probably gonna miss one.
Are there any from that bunch that you're like super pumped for?
There's this one called Bad Genius, which is a Southeast Asian film about a bunch of high school kids who like hijack tests. And it sounds silly, kind of like A long time ago, before Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson and all those people are famous, I think they made like a teen movie called like The Perfect Score, and it's about a bunch of high school kids who steal SAT tests because they want to do well.
Oh, I sort of remember the trailer for that.
Yeah, okay, and it was okay. It wasn't bad or anything, but it was before any of them became big names. And apparently Bad Genius, like the plot line is fairly similar, but it's a lot better.
Okay.
And it's getting a lot of rave reviews, so I'm definitely looking forward to that one. There's also there's a Penelope Cruz film, a Spanish film. I think it's called like The Queen of Spain. Yeah, The Queen of Spain, which is apparently really funny. There's a European war film called The King's Choice, which was again shortlisted for Best Foreign Language Film that I'm kind of excited to see. And then there's actually one that's called Columbus with John Cho and Haley Richardson.
Oh,
that I'm really looking forward to as well.
I've heard really good things about Columbus. I think it's...
So I'm looking forward to that. That was one of the first, like, when I was making my schedule, that was, like, the film that I really wanted to see.
Yeah. I can't remember if it came here to TIFF. It might have, but I believe it's also going to be doing a run in the Lightbox afterwards, so I'll probably get a chance to see that here.
Yeah, and then there's also the one called Lucky. I think it's the last Harry Dean Stanton film, actually. He just died recently.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that one as well. I've heard good buzz. And then the other one's The Florida Project, William H. Macy, which they say is like a dark horse Oscar picture, but we'll see.
Yeah, because that's from the director who, I think we might have mentioned this when we were talking about TIFF in the last episode, but I think this is the director who previously made Tangerine, which was kind of like a grungy Los Angeles set story about prostitutes. And the kind of highlight on the technical side was that he shot it entirely on iPhone. I can't remember if he'd like modified the iPhone with like special lenses to give it a more cinema kind of quality or anything, but
yeah, Sean Baker.
Yeah, so I think he kind of burst onto the scene with that very low budget but successful first project, and now he's back with this one.
Yes. Yeah, so I've heard good buzz about it. Does TIFF have any themes like running? Like I know VIFF has like an Asian film theme where like they make an effort to try and get all these Asian films in. Does TIFF have anything like that, like a theme that they kind of go for?
TIFF always has programs, so there's being the size that it is with nearly like 300 films every year. They've cut back this year, but they always have it split into programs like the Masters program, which is for veteran directors who are like well-established names. Then they have the gala presentations, which are always the buzzy, more mainstream-oriented kind of films, but ones that'll probably be Oscar contenders. Then they have like the platform one that's for edgier titles, ones from some recognizable names, but a mix of influences. So yeah, they have those kind of programs, and then they'll aside from that, they'll often try to come up with not a theme per se, but kind of they'll try to promote a particular aspect of the industry. So a couple of years back, they were kind of pairing with a film festival in Nigeria. And they were trying to, I think it was Nigeria, and they were trying to bring in a lot of films from Nigeria to kind of highlight that industry. And this year, I think partially due to the broader conversation that we're having about women in film, they were really trying to encourage people to try and get out and see as many movies by female filmmakers as we could, and which was totally cool. And I ended up seeing like a full third of the films that I saw were directed by women. I definitely made an effort to kind of seek some of those films out because I think it's important. But they didn't. I wouldn't say they like blasted it out over the marketing in a real way, but they kind of made it clear from the way they were tweeting and the way they were using social media that it was something to kind of keep in the back of your mind when you were experiencing the festival.
Huh, interesting. Overall, though, how was your TIFF experience?
Oh, it was solid. It was probably one of the best of the past couple of years, I would say, just in terms of the variety of stuff I saw and the ease with which I was like moving around and getting tickets. So they've evidently done some work behind the scenes between last year and this year to just like the logistics stuff to make that better. And yeah, I liked a lot of the movies I saw. So that was kind of cool. maybe moving away from festival coverage, there's actually not a lot of like news this week in terms of casting or directing or anything like that.
No, everyone's waiting for Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, it's kind of like we've all got our fingers clenched. We're like, come on, bring it on. But the only stuff that I kind of saw that kind of caught my eye was Jenny Slate, who I know is a favorite of yours. She's been cast.
She was.
Past tense.
Yeah, past tense.
Okay. She was just cast in the Venom movie with Tom Hardy as apparently like a scientist role, but I feel like that's going to be the Hannibal Buress in Spider-Man Homecoming kind of casting, where they'll pick like a well-regarded comedian and then kind of sideline her or something. Which is too bad, but because the stuff that I have seen from her has always been very enjoyable. And then apparently Universal is still moving forward with this whole dark universe thing. They've got Bill Condon on, the Twilight director, to go ahead with Bride of Frankenstein. And
that's all you need to know.
Yeah, and I was like, they talked to him. Apparently he's in pre-production now in London. They're building sets. They're like just gonna try to stiff upper lip it and pretend like the Tom Cruise Mummy thing didn't happen. So I don't know. It feels like we're in a bit of a lull right now in terms of movie news. There's a few like little spurts of things happening, but
it's a tough schedule right now. You got baseball playoffs, hockey starting today, Wednesday, basketball starting. So it's like the lull before the storm, because I think November, December, we're going to see a lot of films make Oscar pushes, right? Like, we haven't even hit the Star Wars marketing wave yet.
No, and then there's the we were in our fall preview in the previous episode. We were just listing off all that's kind of daunting on its own. But then there's all the TV that's happening. Like sometimes we kind of forget to talk about TV here on the show, I think. But
right,
there's
yeah, a little bit.
But part of the problem with covering TV is it's just so much of it. Like there's it's impossible to kind of stay on top of it. I just started watching HBO's The Night Of with Riz Ahmed, which a few of my colleagues were kind of bullying me into seeing. They're like, "How have you not seen The Night Of?" And I'm like,
"What is it? I've never heard of this. What is this?"
It's a sort of a crime thriller type story where Riz Ahmed plays a young kid, well, not a young kid, like a college-age kid whose father works as a cab driver in Brooklyn, or maybe it's Queens. It's one of the boroughs of New York City, and he's kind of like a nerdy guy who tutors some of the popular dudes on his college basketball team. And they invite him to this big glitzy party, and he sees it as an opportunity to suddenly get in with the cool kids, but he borrows, like quotations marks around borrows, his dad's cab for the evening because he can't get a ride to the party. And
that's gonna go for a while.
Not knowing how to work the cab, he gets this girl climb in thinking that he's on duty. And this just sets off this sort of weird evening where they start getting to know each other, but then she winds up dead. And he gets pinned with the murder. And the show kind of unfolds from there. That brings in ideas about immigrant populations in New York and how people are very quick to accuse them with crimes because they see them as an other. And I haven't gotten too far into it yet, but I remember at the time it was originally airing, people were just talking it up nonstop. So from what I've seen so far in the first episode, it's got that kind of addictive quality to it that I feel I'm going to get obsessed with. But that's just one show out of probably 100 that I need to watch in the near future.
Right. Yeah. I still haven't started Westworld, man.
Yeah, neither have I. HBO's offerings itself is hard enough to keep track with.
Yeah. Oh, God, so many things to see in so little time.
Another little shout out though that I'll give to Netflix's stuff. I did watch all of Glow recently. The Alison Brie 1980s.
I haven't finished it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good though, right?
Yeah, it's really good. At first, in the opening few episodes, they were being so I guess, I don't know if progressive is the right word, but I guess unashamed with how they were using profanity and nudity and all the stuff that that would in the past have made it like a cable show. And they were doing it in a way that was supposed to validate the female characters and using nudity in a way that wasn't sexualized. It was more just an everyday thing. But then they seem to, as the girls kind of discovered this underground wrestling ring and got kind of hooked into performing on it, the show kind of moves away from that stuff, and there's still like some cursing and some bad language and stuff, but it was interesting how as the show went on, they were finding other ways to comment on the girls' like inner strength, which I kind of liked. It didn't go that kind of pandering sex position HBO kind of thing that Game of Thrones was notorious for a long time.
Yeah, and I think Game of Thrones has really gotten away from that,
Oh, they have. Yeah, this past couple of seasons have hardly had like any of that typical stuff.
Yeah, because you're done with the exposition or sex position.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, you just need to get people fighting each other and start dying.
Leave the XXX rated stuff to the porn parodies.
Yeah, I don't think there's any good reason for Game of Thrones to have any more nudity anymore.
Yeah.
In the past, you kind of understood why, like if Peter Baelish is in a brothel, you're like, okay, all right, I'm going to see, naked people.
Yeah.
But now that he's out of the picture and people are more concerned about killing White Walkers, there's no need for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so for anybody out there who hasn't watched Glow yet, it's just been one of those things that Netflix bothers you to check out when you first sign in. Definitely give it a shot. Apparently, they're going to be getting a second season. Add that to kind of the stable of Netflix shows that are actually going somewhere and don't feel like they've just appeared out of nowhere. Yeah, are there any shows that you've been like finally catching up with recently that people have been bothering you to see?
No, you know what? The funny thing is I'm usually ahead of the curve among my friends when it comes to TV shows. They're definitely ahead in Westworld, but no, I haven't heard anything. Like usually stuff they want to watch or are watching, I've kind of either am watching at the same time or have watched already.
Well, also in the TV world, then it might be a good time to tease something that I've been working on in the background. I'm working with a friend of mine who has some ideas about Outlander. I believe it's a Starz TV show. It's it's starting up its third season. I think if it hasn't already, it will be soon. And this friend of mine, Kate, not Kate Wilkinson, who's been on the show before, but Kate Stenson, she has some very strong opinions that run against the typical consensus about Outlander being this beautifully progressive and fascinating historical show.
Oh, interesting.
So she's catching up on Outlander right now, so I'm hoping we can have her on the show in the near future to rant and rave about it, because it sounds like she's one of the few contrary voices when it comes to that particular piece. But yeah, that about does it for this episode. Head on over to kinetoscope.ca. We're going to be posting definitely a Blade Runner 2049 review in the near future, as well as some coverage from VIFF as Jason sees a few more titles there. But until the next time, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And from Vancouver, I'm Jason Chen. Thanks for listening. Check out our website, kinetoscope.ca, and we'll talk to you guys later.